This is the second day of the July 94 7-day retreat in Springwater. I didn't mention yesterday that most talks sort of come together out of questions that have been asked in groups and in individual meetings, questions or comments that were made, sometimes the unfinished business of a group. And if questions are repeated here, they are not repeated verbatim. We do not tape meetings. And as everyone knows, our memory is not very reliable. So I may not quote or repeat the question accurately. And yet, for the talk itself, it does not matter, because here we have a question to go into, to explore in depth. Now, if anyone has questions about what is mentioned in talks, please bring it up in meetings, group or individual. You may not have understood what was said. You may disagree with it, or may wish to take it further, add to it, whatever. Or, yes, disagree. Say, I don't see it the way you do. Why did you put it this way? Or whatever form it may take to question what I'm saying. Please don't feel hesitant about that. Actually, this is very welcome. This brings life to our dialogue. One question comes to mind right now that came up in a group yesterday. A person said, friends of mine, little children involved, crashed and died in a plane crash, which causes me unspeakable grief, sadness, and also terror of plane flights. And this question welling up all the time, why did this have to happen to me? Why did I have to lose such close friends whom I loved? It's a very familiar question to all of us, isn't it? Why did it happen to me? Which implies, doesn't it, could have happened to someone else and I wouldn't have been so affected. I wouldn't care so much if it happened to someone else. One may protest and say one doesn't feel that. But isn't that implied in saying, why me? Why am I singled out? And as we ask this question, and the intensity or drama with which we ask it increases our sense of sadness and victimization. I am the victim of this happening. Why me? Why not someone else? Even leaving aside, one may not wish it on anyone. And yet this painful, the question itself causes pain, doesn't it? Why me? The thought. Always me, the unlucky one, the unhappy one, the one who is affected, the one who lost, the one who suffers, the one who has pain or disease or disability. Me who is not as fortunate as others, as successful as others. Why me, so unsuccessful? Such a failure when others are such successes. Why me without a satisfactory relationship when others have it? Why me with less money when others have more? And it goes on and on and on. For all of us, we're all one body of human beings thinking very similar thoughts with very similar effects. The pain of thinking oneself as the sufferer of misfortune, of loss, of lack. And along with this goes another interesting phenomenon that can be observed in oneself. If this thought has been thought long enough, it has become a deeply ingrained pattern of being the victim, the sufferer, the martyr, the loser. If this pattern has run often enough so the body-mind is wired with it, then there comes attachment to that pattern. Attachment to being a sufferer, a victim, a martyr, a loser. Because with thinking this thought, one is thinking of oneself as something. Something that can be held on to as me. Whatever image or role, persona is held on to as me is sort of like something that can be milked for a satisfaction or feeling of some kind of temporary, whatever, stability, security of knowing what one is. One has to examine this very carefully, even if it seems absurd. Sometimes when something sounds absurd to the rational mind, we don't look at it. It couldn't be like this. I'm not attached. But here the question is thrown out. Are we attached to that which we tell ourselves we are? Always the one who. This. One can make a whole content of life out of being a sufferer, a victim. Not letting go of this existence, because there's this implied, deep, unseen assumption that in order to live we have to be something, and being something gives some kind of raison d'être, a reason to be. It's all not clearly thought out, of course, but it is there in observable, albeit subtly observable, behavior and reaction and clinging. Because if someone were to point out to us, and We often do that to each other. Well, so-and-so is suffering even more. We don't want to hear that. It's not helpful. It's sort of the reverse competition. Competition into negativity. Who is the worst off? I got away from the question. This is the nature of a talk, to explore something and maybe to go into the branches. The initial question was, why did this happen to me? This loss. And the grief and terror now that it is there, and I don't like it. I want to be rid of it, run away from it. One can try, and we do try. Does it work? Sometimes it works in abysmal ways in getting hooked on drugs or alcohol to drown out pain of loss and grief and sadness. And I'm not saying it's good for one to feel grief or sadness. This can be a philosophy of life, to sort of supporting one's living in grief and sadness, that is good for me. I have to get through this, and it is something sent to me, trials and tribulations. One can be much simpler about it, without philosophies and theories. Just, it's there right now. What is it? Is that already felt as being sacrilegious? To question what is this suffering that is so painful, so deeply felt and ingrained? What is it? What is it made up of? Is that all right to ask? Sometimes a person feels it's cruel to ask, what is the nature and what are the ingredients of this suffering that you're talking about? Because what we want is support and compassion and pity. Empathy, sympathy. All of which feels good and may also at the same time support our remaining the sufferer, because we become used to these nutrients from other people's empathy, sympathy, support. And someone asks, why do you suffer? What is going on? Not implying you shouldn't suffer. You should be beyond this or get over it, but look at it right now, this moment. What keeps it going? Of course, what started it, in this case, the loss of a friend, and I don't think there's anyone in this room right now who hasn't lost a dear friend or member of the family, husband, wife, a child, or someone one was so close to, one shared a good part of one's life with, was so in tune with each other, and had fun and joy together. And now she's dead or he's dead, no longer here, gone, finished. And the first word about it brings great sadness, great grief. The thought that he or she is not there, or one may be right there, person is dead. It's no longer the same. No live consciousness in that person, although the body, if not entombed for thousands of years, which we have managed to do with bodies, either burnt or put in a decayable case, will deteriorate, will disintegrate. What is a good word? Just dissolve. The ancients have said into the 5 or 6 or 4 elements again. Air, fire, earth, water, ether. That's what we were before, is what now is happening again. The non-differentiation, returning to the elements that make up life and living. So the first word of the sight of the person, no longer what we had, what we wanted, what we enjoyed, what we had pleasure with or fun with, good times with. He's gone, she's not there. And the immediate pain of it, pain of not having what we have gotten used to and what we wanted to continue. Is that the cause of the pain? Which needs the instant cooperation of memory. Does it need memory to listen to the plane? The word plane is there, but it's not the word, it's not the memory, it's there, here, right now. And birds calling, and breath flowing, and words flowing, and an inward-outward attention. Is that there, here? Revealing everything that's going on. So, to be confronted either with a person who has died, or confronted is not a good word, to be in the presence of the dead person, or receive word that my best friend has died. Isn't there immediately memory of what she was, what he was, what he could have been and continued to be? Also, memory and imagination of what he could have or she could have still done in life. There can be maybe quite unself-centered sadness for someone who wanted to do this or that in his life, or her. Wanted to do this work or complete something that is not possible now. And that thought, needing the imagination and the memory to support itself, causes grief and sadness. Can one examine this? I'm not preaching, pointing out what has been observed here by myself, and offering it for consideration, for inquiry, common inquiry into a common problem of loss and grief and sadness. Of course, if one had lived closely with a person, a spouse or companion, child, and that person has died, there is an abrupt termination, maybe, of a shared field of energy in which one has gotten used to live, to exist. And with termination of one life, this energy field seems interrupted, fractured. I've once likened it to feeling, although there's never been any amputation in my life, it must feel like if a limb is amputated, a limb of this combined organism of friends, of family. And the pain of that loss. But energy fields regroup. But thoughts can maintain grief and sadness through dramatic memory, which is held on to, as well as what we talked earlier about the already existing or emerging self-image of a sufferer, which needs to be maintained by thinking in those terms. Can one examine that, discover it for oneself? There's nothing more precious and beautiful in life than direct discovery through insight, even if it is a discovery of sadness or the continuation of feeling as a sufferer that is blown away by insight and directness of seeing. Because we don't have to be anything. We don't have to think of ourselves or of others as anything. Realizing full well through what the body manifests when I think of someone who has died and what we could still do together and what we have done together. And poor me having lost that brings, well, you find out, pain, maybe railing at fate, resentment. Why me? And please let us become very cognizant and aware of the impact of storyline on our moods and state of well-being or ill-being. How we think about ourselves, how we put into words what has happened to us or to our family. How we put into words what is going on for us has a tremendous impact on what we call the mood of this organism, feeling either elated or depressed, resentful, angry, hopeful, enthusiastic, inspired. It's the power of words. How we put it to ourselves or how someone else puts it into words. And identifying with those words. It's amazing. It's an amazing discovery to make. And equally amazing is that it can be made, that it is possible to fine-tune into the running headlines, the running editorials, the running storyline about me and my fate and the others, what they are doing, how they are relating to me, how they are reacting to me, how they should be reacting to me. And constantly bombarded by words and symbols and expressions. And the victim of that, the sufferer of it, without recognizing it until it is seen. Sometimes people come into meetings and say, I hope you don't mind, but I got to complain again. I say, no, I don't mind. Complain, say it, put it out. It's because sometimes when somebody listens non-judgmentally, carefully, lovingly, if you will, because pure listening always has the ingredient of love. When someone listens in a caring way, one may begin to hear oneself and become aware of how thought runs and what effects thought creates in this body. Feeling a constant mild depression, a constant mild anxiety, or a sudden euphoria. just at the thought of something, or at the discovery of what's there. It's not like euphoria, exactly, although one can use this word in different ways. But there's joy when there's discovery, because there's freedom from pattern. Discovery of pattern at a moment of direct, immediate insight is freedom from pattern at that instant. Maybe it is immediately translated into a new storyline. Oh, I have had insight. How terrific I am now. One person mentioned that to me, was doing something that needed concentration, and then the thought came up, how concentrated am I doing this? This is nice. And the stuff spilled. We know that, don't we? How attentive I am, the thought, and one bumps into a closet door. It's the door of our own closet. So, that's a lot of food for looking, material for investigating, because this is what we're ailing from most of all, I think, from the way we talk to ourselves, about ourselves and each other. And you could say, well, wait a minute, I don't always find words there. Sometimes I find no words, no thoughts, and yet there's anxiety, and I don't know what causes it, what sustains it. Well, how carefully has one really looked and listened? But not insisting that it needs to be verbalizations. There can be non-verbal memories. About oneself will have become ingrained in every cell, into the bloodstream, into the breathing, the heartbeat. Just the last retreat, somebody brought an article published in Scientific American about how the brain records fear and conditioned fear. Conditioning meaning something else which had nothing to do with what caused the fear, but was in close proximity to it, closely associated with it, is now able to cause the fear. Of course, like most of our experimentation was based primarily on animals, rats or mice, shocking the poor animals, and then at the time of shock, switching on a light or a loud sound, and after a while the shock was not necessary anymore to induce the anxiety, the fear response, the restlessness in the animal. And upon experimenting with the brain, was found it did not go through any kind of cognitive process. One doesn't have to remember cognitively what happened. The lower parts of the brain are taking care of the whole conditioning process. This is why we often feel and tell each other, I don't have thought, there's no thought there. It just, anxiety arises. But something triggers it. And I can assure you that with more stabilizing awareness, connections can be seen. Particularly since immediately something is verbalized anyways. I don't like this. I wish it would go away. Why me? And these thoughts complicate or deepen or sustain the anxiety. So even if the very first trigger years ago or minutes ago was escaped the attention, what can be attended to is what is going on now. The conflict with a state of being, not wanting to feel this way, and it is in some way or other verbal, maybe not very coherent, but I don't like this can be a whole body language. I don't want it. I want to get rid of it. Like one person says, I want to run away from the whole thing. Which is conflict with what the body is truly manifesting due to some pathways that have been conditioned. It's not doing that against anybody, it's just operating in a mechanical, conditioned way, and that can be observed or felt and need not be resented or escaped from, because there's another way, which is wondering what it is, the opening of wondering, what is this? Let's listen carefully, with all senses open and not defensive. Because from observation to observation we will learn inevitably that defensiveness bars or obstructs observation. Defensiveness bars or obstructs the clarity of observation. If that is noticed and the defensiveness is really felt to be there, it's organismic, it's verbal, mental, but can feel it, defensiveness. Well, what is it? Question that. Question the resistance. Question whatever is the most immediate, here, now, with a gentle, what is it? Not go away, I hate you, I don't like you, but what are you? I want to find out, I want to really get in direct touch, not this distorted, not touching and running and escaping or maligning. So what is grief? What is sadness? What is terror? You could say, well, it's absurd. Terror cannot be observed because terror means running. I don't think there's anything that cannot be wondered about. Whatever the state of the organism is right now, terrorized, anxious, angry. But a first initial wondering what is going on is already a stopping in the tracks. What is happening right now? And if that question comes out of a genuine curiosity, what is happening right now? It will gather energy and seek out quietness, stillness, to look and question and listen and be with what's there. That's the marvel of a genuine question, coming out of genuine interest, gathering energy and seeking out stillness. Because if we really want to listen to the trees blowing in the wind, don't we have to stop talking? To listen to all that's happening in the air. Don't I have to stop moving? Not because somebody says so, then it is sort of an imposed regimen, and it's not real stopping, it's stopping under duress. It's natural. To listen to movement, don't we need to be motionless? To listen to all the movement within this organism and outside. By motionless, I mean not trying to grasp or reject, not turning to and not turning away from, just being here in amazement and wondering. So in the stillness and openness of wondering, listening, what is grief? What is sadness at the thought of someone who died? Where is it? Or are there further thoughts emerging? I could die too. I will die. I'm afraid of it. I don't want to die. I want to continue forever. These thoughts too feed the sadness at someone else's death. Fear of one's own death. It's very early in the retreat to bring that up. We won't go into it very deeply because there's 5-6 days to, if one is so inclined and interested, to explore this fear of dying, this fear of not existing as me. Because a retreat like this may reveal that it's not only the dying at the end of one's life, be it by accident or age, old age, sickness, not only the fear of death of this physical body which we call our own. And not only fear of that, there's fear of not existing in some manner, on some level, all the time. Because that's why we hold on to our images, including the image of a victim or sufferer. Underneath it is the fear of not existing, of not being, isn't it? Don't accept it. We're questioning it together. Starting on a journey of inquiry, alone and together. What is this fear of not existing as this or that, which includes the fear of the death of this body? But that may come in 20 years, 80 years, who knows? Different for each one, and we cannot predict it, although we can be sure of it. But right now, a fear of not existing as me, the way I know myself, the way I want to be, the way I wish to continue, happy, satisfied, or the opposite, continue as a sufferer. What am I? what am I anyways? We have believed strongly, deeply, convincingly that we are what we imagine we are. What people have told us we are, what we can read in any book. Not any book, most books. And we're questioning it. What am I? Questioning our sense of separation, which is also at the bottom of why me? If someone dies, that person has died for everyone. Somebody is alive or lives or is born, it is born with everyone. And not separate from each other. Person who is dying is also me dying. Person who is born is also me being born. Does that make sense? Any bit of sense? I think I'm going too fast and too many things. Let's just remain with this fear of dying and questioning, what am I? Starting just with the way it feels. As one person said, everything within my skin, that's what I am. Adding to it quite quickly my pleasures, my comforts, and the desire for continuation of my pleasures and comforts. With which inevitably goes fear, doesn't it? That my pleasures may not be fulfilled, my desires may not be fulfilled. So, what am I as I'm sitting here? In heat and coolness, quietness and sound, openness and shutness. We will end here for today.